Hello and welcome to the NB Update. I'm Robert McKay of the NB Common Front for Social Justice, reporting from Moncton. This program is brought to you by the NB Media Co-op in partnership with CHCO Television. At the NB Media Co-op, our stories take a social justice lens. If you like what we do, please support us by donating and becoming a member of the co-op by going to our online publication at nbmediacoop.org and clicking on Join Donate. Today on the show, we have an interview with members from Citizens for Peace about their rally in Moncton, marking International Human Rights Day. We'll also hear about a new report from the New Brunswick Child and Youth Advocate. He says the use of so-called seclusion rooms at schools may violate the rights of students, especially students with disabilities. The NB Media Co-op spoke to Shelley Petit, the chair of the NB Coalition of Persons with Disabilities. But first, here in Moncton, members of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers protested at the office of Liberal Cabinet Minister Jeanette Petitbat-Taylor on Monday. The protest came after the Canada Industrial Relations Board issued a back-to-work order following 2 days of hearings, saying the union and Canada Post remain at an impasse.
Why are you here today? Because I'm fighting for our constitutional right to get a contract negotiated fairly, not legislated back in. I think it's wrong. I think that they need to let us negotiate fairly and stop butting in. The government should not be involved in this. This should be between Canada Post and the union. We have 15 vice presidents that they go for 150 grand. They all got bonuses while we were out in COVID. We were out, they sat at home in their office or at home and they got paid bonuses. We got nothing yet. We were out there doing everything that we could to keep Canada Post going.
In a statement, Canada Post said it will resume operations on December the 17th. Expired contracts will be extended until May the 22nd, and Canada Post says workers will get a 5% wage increase for now.
Candles flickered in the cold breeze outside Moncton City Hall as human rights activists gathered to mark International Human Rights Day. The NB Media Co-op spoke to organizers from the group Citizens for Peace, who called for solidarity with people facing human rights violations around the world, including here in New Brunswick.
We're here representing Citizens for Peace, and all in the community were invited. We tried to get the message out through social media and phone calls and such. Uh, it's important for the world to know that we have a Declaration of Human Rights, but it's not always respected. And we don't have to go to conflict zones. It happens in our own community. We have many people who are very marginalized in our community, and they deserve rights. And we have to stand with each other because things don't happen unless people work in community. And I think sometimes that's what's missing. Today, we're celebrating the fact that human rights are for everyone, everywhere, and it is up to us as individuals to stand up when we see human rights violated. When we see people unhoused, it's up to the community to change the situation for folks who are in situations of that nature. When people are, uh, you know, have conflict because of their gender or their uh, 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 faith, or we need to stand up. We need to have people need to have their rights respected.
Alonso?
Yeah, I find sometimes in the public area and people start talking, it could be against the immigrants, against the indigenous people of this area. And the sentiment I get is people think if you respect other people's human rights, they're going to lose some of theirs. And that's sort of a roundabout way of being in the world. Uh, I don't even, sometimes I'll listen, but I won't respond to it. But now and then I see an opportunity and I will reinforce the importance of respecting each other and being more civil. We've lost the capacity to be civil to each other, and it's very blatant in the Brunswick. I was quite surprised how fast that turned. Uh, we have a group here, the Citizens for Peace, and we meet regularly, but most important, I I've met people from Morocco, from Tunisia, from Palestine, and other parts of the Middle East. And also, we'll go out and have sometimes supper, and you find out there are people that are very interesting, and it's a way to get to know people. There was Gilles Vigneault at one point. He's the American Canadian poet and singer. He said the most dangerous place for human beings it is the chez nous, is our comfort zone. And I think it may be nice to be in our comfort zone, but you miss out on the world. One thing I say also, prejudice starts at the kitchen table. That's where the children learn from their parents, and l- children should be made more aware with education system also about human rights, which is not being done. The aspect of civics in class is not being done, and we're not going in a nice direction in our nice little city of Moncton or province of New Brunswick.
The turnout was respectable. We always say the usual suspects. I think I knew almost everyone that was here. They're not all part of Citizens for Peace, but they support us and have been to many events. I realize the time of day, it's at night, the weather is always a factor. But we've been at City Hall many times for uh, demonstrations in the last year. And I find for the most part, we get thumbs up and honks, which are a positive nature. So that is encouraging for me. Uh, but again, I'd love to see the plaza full tonight with candles and it is what it is.
Yeah. But the city of Moncton has been cooperative. They lit up the city hall in the United Nations color, which is blue. And also, we've had lots of collaboration from the province. So this is the first year we're recovering this, but next year we'll have better planning and hopefully increase participation.
Hello, this is David Gordon Koch reporting from Moncton for the NB Media Co-op. I'm on the line today with Shelley Petit, chair of the New Brunswick Coalition of Persons with Disabilities. Thanks for joining us today, Shelley.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as you know, a new report from the New Brunswick Child, Youth, and Seniors Advocate, Kelly Lamrock, has raised issues about the use of seclusion rooms in New Brunswick public schools, saying, among other things, that this may violate students' human rights, and particularly pointing out that this is an issue for people with disabilities. Um, so I guess first of all, I want to ask you, how much you've been hearing about this from your members.
Oh, we've heard about this from parents for quite some time now, since the coalition came into existence in 2020. Plus, before I had to stop working, I was a teacher. I know these were being used in schools. My old district used to tell us to not record the use of them. I refused to use them. I would not use them. I just didn't think they were right. Uh, I could have the same effect by having certain students go for a 2-minute walk in the hallway, but locking a child in a closet, no. As the mom of a child with a disability, never going to do that.
You said that in your district, you were told not to record the use of these.
hmm In the Anglophone South School District, we were told just don't record them. I did have, thankfully, one of my ministers said we're not using those ever here, and we didn't. Much easier to work there. The last school I worked at, it was if you need to use it, but don't record it. And I'm not even sure if that was a mandate from above that or just from the administrator, what the deal was. But that is never a solution, locking a child in a classroom. Ever.
Maybe for our listeners or viewers who might be unfamiliar, these are also called timeout rooms or isolation rooms. And from this report by Kelly Lamrock, their intended purpose is to, quote, provide a safe and calm environment for students, end quote, and as a last resort to ensure safety. So if there's violence or risk of violence, but their use is controversial, and critics, it says here, argue the experience of seclusion can traumatize students, and a growing body of evidence has highlighted, quote, the disproportionate use of seclusion rooms on students from marginalized communities primarily students with disabilities.
They're not being used the way they were supposed to is the problem. So originally it was a timeout room. So it might have been, my daughter has autism. So maybe she was getting really, you could tell, overstimulated. Might be a room that she could go into for a couple minutes just to calm down, almost like a sensory room. That's not how they're being used. It's we have a child with autism, or we have a child, let's say Tourette, and they're blurting. And the teacher does not know how to deal with that because the teacher was never trained and the EA was never trained. So what do? They grab this student, like literally grab them and drag them out into this room, put them in the closet, and then where it won't lock, they shut it and hold it tight from the other side. Now, if that was your child, would you be okay with that? And we've had parents go back into schools, especially elementary, and other students say, "Oh yeah, that's the room they locked so and so in." And it's a closet. And the teacher or the EA stands on the other side and holds the door tight. It's like then they wonder why behaviors are getting worse and why we're seeing an increase in these behaviors. Well, because we're causing trauma in kids. If you lock a child in that closet, the next time an adult even steps near them, especially a child with intellectual difficulties, disabilities, autism, that maybe does not quite have that full comprehension, they are going to think they're going back into the closet and their behaviors are going to escalate. We have traumatized so many kids with the overuse and improper use of these rooms that is what has caused the escalation in behaviors. Guaranteed.
There's a number of recommendations in the report, about a dozen recommendations, and we can get into that a little bit. But I guess I want to ask you first of all, what do you think should be done about seclusion rooms?
I would like to see them come out with a cease and desist of using these rooms until they have a solid program or use or definition in place of when you can use them and what you do with them, as well as and a way that they're going to track the use that is the same across all schools in this province. So if there is a need for the room, you've used it, how long was the child put in there, who was in there with them, and when were the parents contacted? Because parents should not be finding out. I found out when this report came out, I asked my daughter, who is now in her 20s, and I found out she was locked in one once. She said, "Yeah, in grade 7. Remember when I stopped going to school for 3 weeks?" Do you know what that makes me feel like as a parent? To know, like, come on. And because she was autistic and kids were picking on her because she struggled with math and they were bullying her, and she lost it one day and blurted out really bad or threw a book in class and they lost, like, come on. That's not a solution.
It sounds very distressing, and it's notable that the report it stops short of actually calling for a an outright ban on seclusion, and the rationale there is it says this would probably cause schools to rely instead on the police, resulting in quote a high risk of criminalizing disability, which is something that simply doesn't work. Uh, so I guess what you're saying is maybe they can be used, but they have to be more regulated. Is that right?
More regulated, and first and foremost, staff need to be properly trained on what disabilities are. Um, it- I do not blame this on the teachers or the educational support staff at all. I need people to understand that. Like, this is not me saying, oh, those teachers or oh, those EAs. I know from being in the system, there is no training. Most parents wait till they find out that this is the first year in New Brunswick that it's someone being trained to be a teacher actually has to take a course on working with children with disabilities. Second highest disability rate in Canada, but you've not had to take a course on working with children with disabilities before. And there's one class at UMB called Working with Children with Exceptionality. Still hate the name. That was the name of it 20 years ago. And it's not well suited. There's no lived experience brought into this course. This is the first time. So where are we expecting these teachers to learn how to deal with these trainings and work with these children? So it's not their fault. There has to be some true in-depth resources and training provided to all school staff, because if not, we're just going to be causing more and more problems.
And related to what you were saying there, the president of the New Brunswick Teachers Association said in a media release on I believe Monday when this came out, the safety nets, quote, the safety nets that once supported students through community services and schools have disappeared, leaving teachers and students to bear the brunt of an inadequate system. Uh, and it calls for these systemic gaps to be basically addressed. So I guess that it sounds like that pretty much jives with what you observed as a teacher.
Yes, and it's not just people, because I know that they have said hire more teachers and EAs. It's not just bodies that will solve this problem. It's true systemic change and better understanding of what these disabilities are. I mean, one of the simplest things they could do is at the start of the year, instead of paying to bring staff in 1 week before students, bring them in for 2 weeks and spend one whole week where there's just training, and they're calling upon the different disability groups to come in and do some training about the different disabilities that are going to be in that school that year so they have a stronger understanding. I mean, there's still teachers out there that think that all children with autism are like something that they saw on TV and that they all stim and spin. That's not true. Or that everybody with Tourette's just blurts. Not if they have atypical Tourette's. So there needs to be a much stronger understanding of the different disabilities that are going to be in the school that year and how they can best support the student.
Interestingly, it seems that there's possibly no legal authority for this under the Education Act. So, one of the recommendations from Kelly Lamrock is to, more or less sort of bring this into the realm of the law, just pass some kind of amendment so that there's actually some legal authority to do this. But one quote that stuck out for me that is in our article on this on nbmediacorp.org, quote, "Children in New Brunswick schools are the only group we can think of who can be detained and secluded without statutory language defining the limitations on that power and the obligations upon those who exercise it." And sure enough, the title of his report is "Isolated: How School Seclusion Rooms Became Accepted Practice Outside the Law." So just, I don't know, your comment on this kind of, yeah, seemingly lawless activity.
It is. It went from something that was being used the odd time if, for example, probably about 15 years ago, I had this child in my elementary class who had ADHD and his mom could no longer afford the medications. Social development wasn't covering them, mom couldn't afford them, and he was on about day 4 without his meds. His body hurt all over. He couldn't, even his clothing was hurting him. We had to pull the desk away from him. And he started throwing things quite radically. Well, I did move the other students out of the classroom, but we didn't leave him in there alone because he could have hurt himself and it would have terrified him. I stayed in there with him and another EA until we could get him calmed down and deal with the situation properly. And that took maybe 5 minutes. So there are times where you do need to have a student by themselves. But if I just taken him and locked him in a closet by himself, that child never would have returned to school successfully. Never. So there has to be some very strict rules around it because we would not do this to people in jail. They have better rights, criminals, than children with disabilities. And as Mr. Lamrock said in his report, if they're seeing that this is overwhelmingly only happening to children with disabilities, then this is a human rights violation. Well, of course, it's only happening to children with disabilities. It's happening primarily to children with autism, with Tourette's, with ADD, ADHD. These are recognized disabilities, and it's because the system does not know how to work with these children. And instead of training the adults that work with them, we're putting the blame on the children and the families. And all the other supports through ISD, the ISD program led to a lot of this. This integrated school support program that was supposed to fix everything just made it a whole lot worse.
The integrated, could you talk more about that? What is that?
Yeah, well, about 10 years ago, they decided they were going to go to the school supports program and offer supports in schools. And on paper, to somebody who's outside the system, I think it looked okay. We're going to go in, the notion was we're going to take speech therapy and go into the schools and we could hit more kids in one school at a time. The amount of paperwork and the goof, like the foolishness surrounding this, that's all they do is meetings to discuss what we're going to do. And it's another meeting the classroom teachers have to go to that they don't need on their plates. And then all of a sudden you're in there and then one of the team members from outside doesn't make it because they've been delayed. And all we're doing is having speech therapists drive to meetings instead of working with students. And it's all about bureaucracy and paperwork and making things look good instead of actually providing the services, which is why we also see a huge number now in parents that just go, screw it. And they say, I am going to homeschool my child with a disability because that's the only way I know they're getting any care. But then they don't get any speech therapy, OT, PT, these things they need. The parents then try to figure out how to do it and do it with them. None of this is good.
Yeah. And so for the record, Education Minister Claire Johnson stated that, as you alluded to, more information is needed on how seclusion rooms are being used in the New Brunswick school system. That's the statement that the CBC had. So I guess, yeah, she's getting up to speed on this file. So it'll be interesting to see how this shapes up. But it's also interesting, something that you mentioned to me earlier that's not in this report, which is about the use of restraints on children. So, uh, what can you tell us about children being restrained?
Yeah. So, um, about 3 years ago, a W5 episode came out, and two of the families featured in it were from New Brunswick. And we tried to get the Higgs government to move on it then, and they refused to even acknowledge it was a problem. So we talked the special talked about seclusion room use, and it also talked about restraints. We're seeing kids come home that you can see they've been physically restrained by the arms or tied to chairs. You can see the markings on them. That's abuse. That is somebody that doesn't know how to work with the child that is, you know, in emotional deregulation, and they are holding them down, tying them down, and that's if that was your child, you would be livid, and rightfully so. And the worst part is they're doing that, and then they're not even talking to the families because they know what they've done is wrong. And these schools know they're doing it. Um, and we have parents that will talk to the minister, and I hope the minister takes advantage of that. Parents that will say, yeah, here's pictures of what happened to my kid. This school here needs to be shut down. This school here, you need to investigate right away. And, I hope that there are some severe consequences for this because it's wrong. It's wrong. Our children do not go to school to be tied down or locked into rooms because they have a disability.
Is there anything else you want to add about this before we wrap up? Definitely a story that we'll be following.
I'm just glad this is out there now. And so we cannot put the genie back in the bottle, and that this is properly followed up on. It cannot be swept under a rug, because the next step will be if the minister doesn't act on this quickly enough, the next parent who hears about their child being secluded or restrained is going to move forward with a lawsuit. And I don't blame them. Enough is enough. It is time to give the schools the tools they need. This is our future. And if we're not willing to work with the 35% of the population that has a disability, we are just setting everybody up within the system to fail. Because if we're not working with these children so that they can be the best version of themselves, they will never go on to finish school. We were told with our daughter, oh, she'll never finish school. She finished high school. She went on and got a welding degree. She is now in the Canadian Navy. Children can be successful when they have a disability if the right supports are placed around them. But we need people to listen to the experts with lived experience, to work with them, and allow these children to excel the way they excel, not the way to fit in the square box system, because that doesn't work for everyone. And if we don't, we are guaranteeing that 35% is going to end up on social assistance. or more? At what cost? That's a crazy cost for the province.
Well, I think that's a good note to end it on. Thank you, Shelley Petit, chair of the New Brunswick Coalition of Persons with Disabilities. Thanks for joining the NB Media Club today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, following this interview, we reached out to the Anglophone South School District and the Department of Education, along with Beaconsfield Middle School. That's the school where Shelley Petit, who you just heard from, was teaching when she was allegedly told not to record the use of seclusion rooms around 2017, according to Shelley. We didn't hear back from the school by the time of this recording. However, the school district issued a statement saying that a policy against recording the use of seclusion never existed. The district's director of communications said in an email to the NB Media Co-op, quote, "There has never been a mandate to not document the use of seclusion. We ask that staff complete the incident report within one school day of the incident." Now, we have linked the full statement from the school district to a story on our online publication, nbmediacoop.org. The Department of Education also sent us a brief statement. It said that the department takes Kelly Lamrock's report on seclusion rooms seriously and that the department has already reached out to stakeholders, including parents, school principals, and people at the district level to begin understanding when and how these seclusion rooms are being used. Again, you can check out the full story on our website. That's nbmediacoop.org.
That's all for today's edition of the NB Update, brought to you by the NB Media Co-op in partnership with CHCO Television. The NB Media Co-op relies on memberships and individual donations, as well as support from labor unions and community partners. If you would like to get involved, join the cooperative or donate, go to our website, nbmediacoop.org, and click on Join Donate. This reporting has also been made possible in part by the Government of Canada and the Canadian Association of Community Television Users and Stations. Thanks for joining us today. For the NB Media Co-op, Robert McKay.